everyone. Welcome back. Episode 60 here of the Rick and Danny Show. Episode 2 of our return. Hopefully,
The
we're in
much
a better.
anticipated return of the
Yes.
Rick and Danny Show.
Hopefully, the flow continues to improve episode over episode. And we appreciate you all tuning in. And hopefully, you enjoy. We teased this a little bit on the overtime last week, but the breaking news in the last, we're recording this episode towards the end of February, is that Victor Wembanyama, arguably the next face of the NBA, a absolute true somebody I can literally say I've never seen anything like it. You know, he's 7'4" and has the skills of a guard and the attitude of someone who, the drive to be a good player.
hmm
Unfortunately, was diagnosed with a condition, Danny, that I know you have specialized training in and you manage a decent amount of in your practice.
No, that's right, Rick. So the ESPN headline that was just a few days ago was Victor Wembanyama out for the season, and you expect that you get some kind of injury, muscle injury, bone fracture. These guys are playing at a high
Yes.
level in the NBA. And then I read that he had a blood clot. And they said, I think ESPN wrote that he had a blood clot in his shoulder. And I said, okay, what are you talking about? So if you read into it, he actually has I think a right upper extremity DVT. I didn't read the latest, report on it, but that's what, they alluded to. So DVT is a deep vein thrombosis. So it's basically a blood clot in the deep veins that are sending blood back to your heart. And his is most likely near the shoulder. So those are veins that are either called the subclavian vein or the axillary vein, which kind of travel along deep in the tissue in the shoulder and right behind your collarbone. And deep vein thromboses can be very serious. So I'm not sure if he had presented with right arm swelling or if he had pain or he had redness, but most blood clots when they form present that way, either with swelling and pain or one or the other, or you could also have some redness associated with it. The arm can kind of feel warm and hot. And those are signals that you should get evaluated. If you have one extremity, upper extremity or lower extremity that has acute onset, rapid onset swelling. And these blood clots in the upper extremity are much rarer than the lower extremity. So in our hematology clinic, we see lower extremity blood clots much more commonly than upper extremity. And that's because there's different risk factors for both of those diagnoses. So in the lower extremities, risk factors can be prolonged immobility, or you injured yourself and are bedridden, or you were hospitalized and immobile for a period of time. So it's more of the immobility that can lead to a blood clot formation in the lower extremities. Those clots can travel up to the right side of your heart and then go into the lungs, and they call that a pulmonary embolus or pulmonary emboli when the clots travel and can affect the pulmonary arteries in your lungs, and that usually presents with shortness of breath and chest pains. Um, so, but getting back to Victor Wembanyama's case, an upper extremity blood clot, deep vein thrombosis, is a pretty rare event. We see it more commonly in our patients who have IVs placed in their arms. So if they need, some medication given through an IV, or they have a permanent, catheter in their chest or upper extremity, um, those can predispose patients to blood clots. But in his situation, this is a young, what is he, early 20s, right, Rick? Um, Really
Yeah,
healthy guy
correct. I
who
think he's
plays
21 maybe. 21. Yeah, he's 21.
21. Yeah, he plays, basketball at the highest level. And the best, guess and educated guess I can make for why this happened to him is that it could be related to thoracic outlet compression, which is basically you have this space between your collarbone and the first rib that the vein travels in that space, kind of the vein that the deep vein from your arm travels into the shoulder and into that space, and then there's a vein that travels down to the heart to drain blood. And in that space, you can have a muscle or even kind of some fibrous tissue there that can compress the vein. And there is, this phenomenon in people that use their arms for different activities, tennis players, patients that have a lot of repetitive motion in one arm. And with him in the shooting, that he does in a game, and just playing basketball, I think that would be my guess for why this developed in him, is that probably had compression of that vein in the thoracic outlet. So just a very kind of, I'm sure, shocking to a lot of people to read that, but it is a treatable situation, and he should get better from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The first thing that I thought of when it came out was Chris Bosh. He was a little older. I think he was in his early
Hmm.
30s, but similar situation. He, out of nowhere, I think he had chest pain, and they worked him up and found blood clots in his lungs. More of it had already migrated kind of in that direction. And you just
Right.
wonder, like you said, what's causing these, you know, deep vein thromboses in younger, presumably otherwise healthy patients. It's scary, and just goes to show you that even if you don't have any real risk factors, that these things are, that anything's possible.
Correct. Yeah. And the reason he's out for the season is because we treat deep vein thromboses, these blood clots, with anticoagulation, which is these are blood thinners that patients get on because the blood thinners will prevent any more clots from forming in his body and will then allow his body to break down the clot. And there's kind of this false notion that the blood thinner that he needs to be on will be the thing that breaks down the clot. It's actually his own body that will produce these enzymes that break down the clot over time. And our bodies are pretty good at doing that. So he'll need to be on that blood thinner, in my opinion, for an upper extremity clot that we think, if it is a provoked clot from, say, compression in the thoracic outlet, 3 months is usually sufficient to be on a blood thinner. But in his case, it's already almost March, and playoffs are coming in a couple of months. So that's why they said this is a season-ending injury, because he'll be on that blood thinner for 3 months and too high risk to play, you know, NBA basketball on a blood thinner.
Yeah, exactly. That's too dangerous, and not only that, think about it from a liability issue with how much money these guys make.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very physical sport, and high risk of injuring himself, and he should get better from this. And sometimes those situations where you have compression of the vein, um, and we'll be interested to see what his doctor says, but occasionally people need surgery for that if his doctor thinks it could happen again, and it's kind of to relieve that pressure in that location. So certainly would hate for that, this situation to happen to him repetitively, because he's such a young star, and everyone thinks, like you said, Rick, that he's going to be the next face of the NBA and really, drive the NBA to the future. So we're praying for him.
Yeah, hopefully he makes a full recovery and is able to resume his incredibly promising career.
And I want to say I collect his basketball cards, so I need him to be
Oh,
healthy.
there you go.
Yes.
Did did Dan? And I don't know if the listeners know, Danny is also a part-time Orlando Magic season ticket holder. So
I am, Rick.
he has
I
vested
am.
interest to get him healthy so he can watch him live.
So I can still occasionally see him play. Although I didn't get the opportunity this year to see him. I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, I'm sign me up for that one. I definitely want to. I got to go see him live at least once. Unbelievable.
All right, next year you're in, Rick.
Let's do it.
I like it.
Well, thank you everyone, and really, obviously, this is probably a better episode because I didn't have to say much. And Danny, thank you for that excellent explanation on deep vein thrombosis and sort of general management and considerations. Is there anything our listeners, I mean, should look out for? Is family history? What are I mean, it seems like such a non-specific type thing. Is there anything though that
Yeah.
the casual person can pay attention to?
I think just the warning signs of deep vein thromboses, which again are going to be swelling, and it's worrisome if it's unilateral. So remember, lower extremity blood clots are more common than upper extremities. So if one leg all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and it's twice the size of the other leg, go into your doctor immediately, contact your doctor to get checked out. Doesn't mean 100% that there's a blood clot there, but you definitely want to be evaluated. So unilateral swelling, pain, and redness are things to look out for. Family history wise, blood clots can be familial, where you have risk factors that are passed on, by mom and dad, that may increase the rate of blood clots. But these are things that probably are not as common as other conditions. So I wouldn't have our listeners worried that, they have some familial risk factor for clotting. But if any of our patients are young and develop a spontaneous blood clot without a clear explanation for why, those are the most appropriate patients we look into maybe familial risk factors. So those are just a couple things to keep in mind. And blood clots are treatable. Anticoagulation is a must, and we treat them promptly. Usually within the day of diagnosis, you want to get the patient on a blood thinner to prevent further clotting and to prevent the clot from traveling elsewhere in the body. So it is a kind of an urgent, emergent situation that you want to get handled very soon, with any symptoms that might be suspicious for a blood clot. So that's probably the most important things to let our patients know about. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. It's rickandannyshow@gmail.com. Again, we're on Twitter and Instagram at _CSNF, and on Facebook, Cancer Specialists in North Florida. Rick, great talking to you again, man.
Oh, always a pleasure. Thanks, guys, for listening.